Hello and welcome to Perhaps It's You, an unofficial fan rewatch podcast of the classic television series Unsolved Mysteries. If you're following along, we're on Season 1, Episode 5 of the Amazon Prime original Robert Stack's episodes. I'm Samantha and I'm here with my co-host Liz. How's it going, Liz?
Good. How are you, Samantha?
I'm good.
I have some updates for you.
Wow, right off the bat, what are they?
Yeah.
This is going to be a long episode, so we should let's get the updates out of the way.
Yeah, let's just dive right in.
And get started.
First update. Perhaps I haven't always given our dear listeners the correct email address.
Yeah, so
I'm not going to admit either way. Look, we all knew it was just sooner or later until I screwed something up, and it turned out it was sooner.
I think I wasn't able to get perhapsitsyou@gmail.com, so our email address is perhapsitsyouPodcast@gmail.com. We asked people to email us ghost stories, and we used the wrong email address.
So whoever has perhaps it's you at Gmail.
Sorry.
I mean, you're welcome for all the cool ghost stories you've been getting. But if you've sent us a ghost story
please resend it.
And you didn't get any acknowledgement from us, that means we didn't get it.
If you're not following us on Facebook, you might be like, what the fuck are they talking about? We are going to do a Halloween special. And part of that is we want to tell your ghost stories. We've gotten a couple already that are pretty awesome.
Yeah,
but we'd like some more.
Ones.
So if you've had a paranormal experience, write in and tell us about it. We want to hear it.
Spooky has happened to you, not something you saw on Creepypasta, like a real life lived haunting or something you can't quite explain.
We want to hear about it.
We want to hear about it.
We also want to hear what you would like for our Halloween special. We're going to watch something besides Unsolved Mysteries, something Halloween themed, but also sort of Unsolved Mysteries adjacent. And we haven't quite
We're debating
determined.
a few ideas. If you have any suggestions,
tell us what you
open.
think we should watch and review for our Halloween special, in addition to telling listener ghost stories.
This is a real cool, laid-back podcast, so...
Yeah.
By which I mean highly professional.
Yeah, exactly. But we love Halloween. It's one of our favorite holidays, if not our favorite holiday. So we want to do something special.
We found a way, I feel like each of us have found a way to expand Halloween into an all-year-round lifestyle.
Absolutely.
But we should celebrate the mother holiday and give her due with a special.
So let us know what you'd like to hear.
I don't even know what I'm saying. I feel like I'm going to be extra loopy this episode. I'm going to just apologize ahead of time.
Because you had a big day yesterday.
I had a tiring day at Twin Cities Zine Fest. It was a lot of fun, but dear Lord.
Exhausting.
You
really have to be like on it when you're at a booth like that selling yourself. So
that's a lot of extrovert time for me.
I'm actually surprised you're not like sleeping right now.
I know. So I woke up feeling hungover despite having not had any booze, but probably not having had enough water.
Yeah.
So that might be part of it. Though we did get free LaCroix.
Oh, wow.
So there's the top secret reason why I was really there.
For the free LaCroix.
Hush, I was there for the free LaCroix. But I, didn't want to leave the table, so... Yeah. Anyway, so I'm going to be extra loopy. Also, Samantha and I have spent this whole past week basically doing research for you.
For this episode.
We dove
This is a long one,
deep.
folks.
So...
Get ready.
Not only am I, like, punch-drunk and... just more out there than usual. This is a bizarro episode.
We have a lot to cover.
I have
one more thing I want to mention, and that is our giveaway that we talked about in our last episode. We're going to extend it because we haven't gotten a ton of entries.
No, we've gotten so many entries, Samantha. It's by popular demand that we are extending it. That's what people always say.
Right. Yeah. Scratch everything I just said.
Yeah.
People are pounding down our door.
We want the dad joke magnets. They said,
to get these dad joke magnets.
Fine.
Actually, no one has entered on Instagram. So if you enter our giveaway on Instagram, you're pretty much guaranteed to win.
That's embarrassing.
So follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. We're at Perhaps It's You. Go share. I feel like if you share any of our posts, we're going to enter you to win.
Yeah, probably.
A dad joke magnet. So go share whatever you want.
The rules on this
are
a little loosey-goosey.
They're getting more loosey-goosey as we go on. But if you win one of these magnets, you'll get a private message from us. So go follow us and enter to win. There's nothing on Twitter because we're both really overwhelmed by Twitter. So
I didn't want to try to do a giveaway on Twitter.
I mean, can barely even make myself get on Twitter as it is.
Go follow us on Twitter, but
Liz runs our Twitter, thank God, because if I did, there would be nothing.
We've divvied up the tasks. This is a true indie podcast,
It
right?
really is.
Like, I'm handling our graphics. Samantha is doing our editing. We've split up the social media. It's just us, folks.
It really is. And we're amateurs, so this is what you get.
Highly professional skills. I have a couple other updates.
Oh, okay.
We heard from listener Rachel. In our last mystery, you commented on an old lady named Dorcas.
Yes.
That's not a name I had heard before.
Nope.
Don't want to be too mean about it, but wouldn't want the name Dorcas. Rachel commented to let us know that Dorcas is a biblical name.
It was a real name. That's the correct pronunciation, thank goodness.
Yes.
Really unfortunate. Rachel knows a Dorcas.
Yes.
And I think I said
so sorry, Dorcas.
that I empathize with how many dork jokes she was definitely subjected to in high school. What an unfortunate name. I mean, at one point that was probably a really pretty name, but guys, don't name your kids Dorcas.
I mean, I would think that would go without saying, but
just setting them
not.
up for a miserable childhood. No, if your name is Dorcas and you had a great childhood, I apologize.
It just doesn't seem possible, though. It just doesn't. So apologies to Rachel's friend Dorcas. Yeah, I was like, that cannot be, not that I have read the whole Bible. I'm not a religious person, but I was like, I don't remember the name Dorcas.
Don't remember the character Dorcas.
Apparently that is the Greek translation of Tabitha. If you remember Tabitha from the Bible.
So if your name is Tabitha, it's actually Dorcas?
Yup.
So we also apologize to all the Tabithas.
We apologize to all of the Tabithas.
I would just go by Dory if I was, I'd be like, I'm named after a Finding Nemo character.
Is that where Dory comes from, Dorcas?
I don't know. But if my name was Dorcas, I would go by Dory.
Sure. I mean, I would probably just move and never talk to my parents again.
Change my name.
Yeah. Another update came from Megan, a friend of mine and our resident librarian. Oh. She wrote in to let us know you had sent me a picture of facial hair that doesn't come up till season 3.
Mm-hmm. It's on our Instagram page, folks. Go look at it.
Which is
an impressive display of facial hair.
A mustache that blends seamlessly into mutton chops, yet there is no beard. I had asked, is there a name for that? There is.
Oh, tell me.
It's the Chester A. Arthur, named after our president, who had the same facial hair.
Wow, okay.
And I feel like I don't really ever hear anyone talk about President Arthur.
Nope.
So I guess he just really lives on in facial hair form. That's what we remember.
That's a legacy everyone wants.
Yeah. So he's like the real most valuable mustache of all time because he was a president and has facial hair named after him. So he's like the ultimate.
The ultimate MVM.
MVM is Chester A. Arthur.
Go find a picture of him and put on our Instagram page. So
you could compare him to
yeah.
this guy that's not even coming up until season 3 that we're already talking about how great his mustache is.
It's a really bad segment too. It's like an alien, a really dumb like alien crash landing, I think. So, but we'll be able to talk about his facial hair and we'll know what it's called. Thank you, Megan.
Thank you, Megan. One last update came from Rochelle, who reassured me that yes, I was right. The Queen Mary was 20 years after the Titanic.
Okay.
The Titanic came first.
We should always fact check with Rochelle before we record.
She's our resident history nerd, and there's going to be very few times that I am right about history or boats. That's never going to happen.
Ever again.
So I appreciated her taking a moment to say, yes, you were correct.
Thank you, Rochelle.
I'm never going to be right about any of those things again. So I'm just going to savor this moment where I knew something about a boat.
In history.
By which I mean a ship.
So we're saying it wrong.
As
we're bragging about getting it right.
Because you can put a boat on a ship, but not a ship on a boat.
Okay. I understand that now.
Yeah.
I will continue to get that wrong.
I will continue to get that wrong.
At least it makes sense.
It's a jail prison situation.
Yep.
Boat,
ship. Boat.
Yeah. A ship boat.
Tomato. Whatever.
Yeah. Same thing. I think that's all of my updates.
All right, so should we get into it?
Well, okay.
Settle in, folks, because grab a LaCroix, pop some popcorn. This is going to be a long one. I went down several internet rabbit holes. I watched 2 History Channel documentaries about my first case. I'm assuming you went down several internet rabbit holes yourself.
I don't even know I'm like scarred
I've lost
for life.
days So this episode, I don't even know what year it is right now.
This week has been a blur of conspiracy theories and going to parts of the internet that I didn't really like and don't want to go back to. This is how much Samantha loves you, folks. She watched 2 History Channel documentaries.
They were actually more interesting than so. My first mystery, which you may already have known if you follow us on Instagram, is DB Cooper. And I was kind of expecting this to be like an Alcatraz situation where it's like a mystery everyone is super fascinated about except me. Like I really couldn't. I could not give less of a shit about Alcatraz. So I really thought I was going to feel that way about DB Cooper. I don't know why. My fiance Travis insisted that I would find it fascinating, and he was not wrong. I actually did find it fascinating. And of my own volition, I went and sought out history documentaries on YouTube and watched the entire thing.
I really like the idea of calling a mystery you're not that interested in an Alcatraz situation. Which most people would be like, oh, that's like you're trying to escape. It's like, no, I just don't give a shit. Like other people think it's interesting and I fall asleep.
We're both dreading the Alcatraz episode of Unsolved Mysteries. We might actually have aforementioned our friend Rochelle come on the podcast. Friend of the pod, Rochelle might come on the podcast to talk about Alcatraz.
Because if it's just me and Samantha talking about
we're
Alcatraz,
going to be like, and then they got in the water, what, blah, done. Okay.
It'll be the worst podcast of all time.
Everyone will unsubscribe.
Yeah. But don't worry. We've got a plan. We're going to fix it.
Yep. But this is not that day. This is not Alcatraz Day. This is DB Cooper Day. And I'm actually kind of excited to tell you about all this stuff I researched. But first, I'm going to tell you about how Unsolved Mysteries described the legend of DB Cooper. Are you ready?
I'm ready, and I'm going to give a little shout out to Ryan because he said this was his favorite mystery on our Facebook page.
On our Facebook giveaway.
So we hope that you enjoy this, Ryan.
We're dedicating this to Ryan.
To Ryan.
So Thanksgiving Eve was how they always describe this night, which I think is really cute. 1971 at 2 p.m., a man walks into the Portland airport. And this guy is dressed as like a typical businessman. He's wearing a suit, a tie, a raincoat, loafers. He's carrying what Robert Stack keeps calling an attaché case, which is a fancy way of saying briefcase.
Robert Stack's a little pretentious sometimes.
I was like, this must be a special thing. So I looked up difference between attaché case and a briefcase. And it's the same thing. They have the same definition. It's a suitcase that you put papers in.
In my mind, when people say attaché case, I'm picturing like a silver briefcase from the movies that's full of money.
I mean,
but I don't think
it's literally a briefcase.
That's not a real definition. That's the definition that my mind has created from watching too much TV.
Yeah, no, it's a briefcase that if you want to sound fancy, you call an attaché case. But
wasn't he wearing all black, Samantha?
Well, most businessmen, I mean, suits are black or they're gray, and he happened to be wearing all black. I don't know. His tie was black too.
Unsolved Mysteries acted like this was very mysterious, and I was like, he just looks like a guy going to work.
Everyone described him as a normal businessman. I mean, yeah, his tie was black too, so maybe that's, I don't know, that's how, if you were a secret agent, that's what you'd wear, but he was an inconspicuous businessman getting on a flight from Portland to Seattle. And they show him going up to the ticket agent, giving his name as Dan Cooper. DB Cooper is completely made up. There was a newspaper that misprinted it as DB Cooper, and everyone thought that sounded a lot more exotic than Dan Cooper.
Wait, that's why we refer to him as DB Cooper? Yeah. It's because of a typo?
It was because of a typo in a newspaper. He gave his name as Dan Cooper, and people were like, well, Dan Cooper sounds like my kid's friend's dad, so DB Cooper sounds like
DB Cooper.
Yeah, like
he
a secret spy
anything.
Agent. Right. So he never gave the name DB Cooper. It was a complete accident. But now that's how we know him.
Do you think he's alive and pissed that we're calling him by the wrong fake name?
No, but we'll get to that later. So in the reenactment, they show him walking up to the ticket counter, asking if the plane he's about to get on was a 727. I don't really think that actually happened. I think he just knew that this was going to be a 727. But the point here is that the 727 was the only commercial airliner with a staircase that descended from the bottom of the plane, and it could be opened from the passenger cabin in flight. Who designed this airplane? There's no reason on at least a commercial airplane that you need to open any door in the middle of the flight.
Yeah, it's really weird. I don't know why any airplane would have that feature. If you know, let us know.
I don't know. It sounds like dumb engineering to me.
It doesn't make any sense. Was that so they could
jump out?
What
other reason would you need to open an airplane door in the middle of the flight?
They want to just throw things away. They're like, we don't want this anymore.
And from the past, so this was obviously changed shortly after this incident, but yeah.
You don't say.
Yeah, so it was important to him that he was on a 727 for reasons we'll talk about later. So as the plane was preparing to take off, he handed a note to flight attendant Florence Schaffner, and the plane took off, and she didn't really look at the note. She assumed he was being a creepy...
I'm sure.
Flight attendants probably get grossly flirted at all the time, and this is what she assumed he was doing. He was probably asking her to go give him a blowjob in the bathroom.
Or just, like, giving her his number or something, and she was like, creepy. I don't care.
But he insisted. He kept saying, look at the note, look at the note. So she finally did, and the note said, Miss, I have a bomb in my briefcase. I want you to sit by me. And then when she came over to be like, what the fuck? He opened the briefcase, and inside, she described a big battery with a bundle of dynamite sticks and like some wires wrapped around it.
What they showed in the reenactment looked like every bomb.
From every cartoon. Cooper tells her that all he has to do is attach one wire to one gadget and they'll all be dead. So clearly she was petrified.
I like that she was like, oh, this guy's a creep. I don't want to read this note. And then his note did literally say, like, Miss, come sit by me. So, yeah, all right, it was about a bomb, but it was a little bit flirty.
Still a little flirty and creepy.
Yeah.
So she went and informed the cockpit about the bomb. His demands were $200,000 in cash. In Unsolved Mysteries, they said he specifically asked for small bills. I don't think that was true because in the documentaries I watched, it sounded like he didn't ask for that specifically. So they're like, let's give him all 20s and it's going to weigh 30 pounds.
Oh, interesting.
That's not clear to me, but he did want them in a knapsack. And then he wanted 4 parachutes, 2 front packs and 2 backpacks. He specified that the airplane needs to remain in the air until the money and parachutes were ready at the Seattle airport. He also specified that the passengers not be told that the plane was being hijacked. This was my favorite part about all of the reenactments in this episode. You could tell that they couldn't afford actors and actresses to fill up the entire plane. They had like 8 people in an empty plane. They were all sitting in the aisle seats.
I mean, yeah, they don't want to pay extras to just be slightly in the background.
Right, but there's ways to film that, I would think, where like you're not showing the whole empty plane. It was really
like, remember that time D.B. Cooper took over an essentially empty plane as his hostages?
Right. So the FBI asked the airline if they wanted to pay the ransom, and the airline was like, yes, immediately. We're going to pay this ransom. Apparently, victims of extortion have the option to pay it. Law enforcement can't. That's what the FBI agent described. But if they want to pay it, they are more than welcome to.
I mean, I'm sure they don't want to lose their plane and the bad publicity of that.
They don't want the plane to blow up. And presumably in real life, the plane was full and all those people would have died. So what they did was they got a bank in Seattle to give them all this money. They recorded all the serial numbers and photographed each bill. And when they got to Seattle, Cooper instructed that the airplane land but remain on the runway. They taxied the airplane to like a remote part of the runway. And they kept insisting in Unsolved Mysteries that the passengers were like unfazed by this. That they were like, la-di-da, I guess we just have to sit here for a while. I really don't think that was true. Entirely. If I was a passenger, I would be like, what the fuck is going on right now? I don't know. That seems strange to me.
How much do you drink on a plane, Samantha?
On a 30-minute flight from Portland to Seattle, I get trashed.
I knew it. And the listeners knew it too.
So they gave him this money. They gave him $200,000, but they gave him all in $20 bills, so it weighed 21 pounds.
That's actually kind of a funny fuck you.
Yeah, and then one of the parachutes they gave him was defective, sort of. The backup chute wouldn't open, so it was like stitched together because it was for training, not for actual use. It was unclear to me if they did that on purpose, or I think they did. But I'll get to that later.
I would hope they would know which parachutes worked and which were for training.
Yeah.
I would hope that's not an accident.
None of them were so defective that the main chute wouldn't open. It was just one of them had the reserve chute stitched together. But anyway, they refueled the plane. He finally allowed the passengers to leave, and then they gave him the money. He insisted that the pilot take off with the door down, and the pilot was like, no. That's not
a thing.
I can't do that. Like, the door has to be closed. The D.B. Cooper apparently finally relented and said, okay, you can put the door up, and now we have to take off and go to Mexico. But apparently the elevation and speed that D.B. Cooper demanded the pilot fly at would not get them to Mexico. So the pilot gave him the option of, I think, Reno or Vegas. I might be wrong about that. But D.B. Cooper chose Reno, and they took off with the door up. And then mid-flight, he told the remaining flight attendant, Florence Schaffner got off and her other coworker stayed on the plane. And at some point during the flight, he told her to go up in the cockpit. And as she was going into the cockpit, she turned around to close the curtain and she saw him fastening something around his waist. Then when she was in there, some lights went off that indicated to the pilot that he was trying to operate the door, the below door. And then suddenly there was a loss of cabin pressure and he had jumped out.
So how far into the flight does he jump out?
They estimated the spot where he jumped out. The crew felt that he had jumped somewhere near the tip of Washington State. And they estimated the area where he landed. It was it stretched from Lake Merwin to approximately 20 miles north of Portland. And there was a huge search effort for him. They had planes and helicopters. They had apparently 40 FBI agents plus all the searchers. Mm-hmm. And they never found him. The flight attendants helped the FBI create a sketch of his face, which is kind of like the famous weaselly-looking sketch that people associate with D.B. Cooper. Later in the episode, Florence Schaffner, who they interviewed for Unsolved Mysteries, said that face never really looked like him. And so Unsolved Mysteries had her work with another sketch artist to make a different.
Yeah,
I don't know how legit that was. It had been so long at this point, and
she was claiming she remembered his eye color and all of the details of his face, and that seems I don't know that I really buy that.
Right. So the mystery is what happened to D.B. Cooper. Did he survive and get away? Because no one's ever found him. Some evidence did surface. 7 years later, November 1978, a hunter discovered a plastic placard from a 727 that had been ripped from the lower stairwell, and it was determined that that came from the plane that D.B. Cooper jumped out of. 15 months after that, a family having a barbecue on the shore of the Columbia River, 20 miles southwest of Cooper's supposed jump point, which should be noted that it was upstream of where the estimated location of where he might have landed. They dug up $5,080 worth of waterlogged bills, and all of the serial numbers they were able to get off of those bills matched ones from Cooper. So that was some of the money that he had taken with him.
Samantha, if you had dug up that money, would you have just kept that money?
It was not usable money.
Oh.
So they didn't show it in Unsolved Mysteries, but they did show it in one of the History Channel documentaries, and it was bits and pieces of money. It was intact, and the rubber band was still holding it together, but it was almost totally disintegrated.
Wow, that's disappointing.
Yeah, which is probably why they turned it in, because
if you were just at a barbecue with your family and you found $5,000, great barbecue.
Best barbecue. Yeah. I would go to so many more barbecues if I found $5,000. Yeah, it wasn't usable money. Most of them were completely black, and the few that they were able to get, it was kind of a miracle, actually, that they were able to get serial numbers off of these.
Gotcha.
It was suspected that someone had seen a large white object floating in Lake Merwin, but they never found any parachute or any evidence.
That was actually the Loch Ness Monster.
It could have been.
It was not.
The Lake Merwin Monster.
They did see a large white object unconnected to D.B. Cooper. That's a whole other episode.
It's a whole other mystery.
About a giant jellyfish-like creature.
This FBI agent they interviewed made a lot of speculations about him getting injured and crawling to a creek to drink water. I don't know how he could possibly have known that is what would have happened.
First of all, the reenactment of the guy crawling to a creek to drink water and then instantly dying was hilarious. That's a great reenactment. This FBI agent speculating about D.B. Cooper seemed to be a little bit in love with D.B. Cooper.
A little bit.
You know what I mean? He seemed to have this sort of admiration, this childlike wonder, I bet he did this.
Yeah.
He was the Bear Grylls of his time, and he was out in the wilderness. We don't know what was in his pockets.
Oh, yeah.
What if he had a lighter? He could have survived for 100 years.
I wrote down the quote he said. He said, as long as a man's got a knife, a cigarette lighter, and the clothes on his back, he could have lived indefinitely out there.
That's not true.
How do you get food? How do you shelter? You can't live indefinitely in the woods wearing nothing but a suit and loafers and a cigarette lighter.
What he didn't mention was that he knew that D.B. Cooper was a vampire. That's how he can live indefinitely.
He was actually a half crocodile. He sunned himself during the day, and then at night he was ready to go. I don't know.
I would be way more interested in this case if we found out that someone believed that he was a lizard person. Which someone somewhere
You
does.
didn't go deep enough into the internet to find the reptilian D.B. Cooper theories. Yeah. I'm sure they're out there.
Which, if someone in your family believes that the government is controlled by reptile people, is there a way for you to get in touch with us about that? This is a total sidetrack and I'm sorry, but I keep hearing about, how people believe that lizard people are really controlling the government. And I just, I need to know more. Like, why? How?
You haven't gone deep enough on Reddit.
I can't tell when people are joking. Or something like that.
That is the problem with those conspiracy theories.
I keep going like, this can't be real. So if your, great aunt Dorcas believes that Barack Obama is really a reptilian, could you email us?
Please do that.
At perhapsitsyouPodcast@gmail.com. Anyway, sorry. D.B. Cooper was probably not a reptilian, though we don't know for sure because we never found his body.
We can't know any of this for sure. But skeptics say that... So here's the thing with this mystery and a lot of mysteries, is when there's a piece of evidence, there's people that say it's proof he's alive. And then there's people that say it's proof he's dead.
It's not really proof of anything.
There's no proof of anything. One guy they interviewed who was a believer that he had made it out said literally they found $5,000. They didn't find $200,000. So I'm convinced he's alive.
Just because you haven't found it doesn't mean it's not there.
So that's a case of people who say, they look at this and you're like, well, this $5,000. Also, none of these bills ever turned up in circulation.
Yeah, that's actually a much bigger clue.
And the fact that they found $5,000 on a sandbar.
Mostly burnt.
Most people say, well, that's probably evidence that he's dead. But then believers and conspiracy theorists say, well, where's the rest of the money?
That just means it hasn't found. Or these bills were so badly damaged that the rest of them weren't recognizable.
Right.
Or they're just in the woods. Or beavers ate them. I don't know.
This wasn't the only skyjacking. We have found out this was kind of common.
This was the glory age of skyjacking.
We found a book about that. I don't know who calls it the glory days of skyjacking, unless you're a skyjacker.
Hijackers do, Samantha, and they miss those days, and they look back on them, and they say, I really wish big government wasn't keeping us from all the skyjacking we used to do.
Because it
was so much fun.
These were the days when you could get on a domestic flight and you just walked on. You didn't have to
show
any identification.
Any Anyone could buy a ticket. You could give your plane ticket to someone else, which seems crazy now. Like if I bought a plane ticket to go to Long Beach to see the Queen Mary, and then I was like, I don't want to go. I could just hand it to Samantha. She could just cross out my name and write her name.
I could cross out your name and write Dan Cooper.
You could write Dan Cooper, and they'd be like,
you don't look like a Dan.
Why don't you go on this plane and smoke the whole time in this tiny, room? Because, yeah, even when I was a kid, people could smoke on international flights.
They said there was someone, I can't remember if it was an Unsolved Mysteries or one of the documents, it's all blurring together, but one person was like, it's not like he smoked that many cigarettes. He only smoked an entire pack.
He only
30-minute
plane. He didn't smoke that many. Well, that's actually kind of come up with my mystery as well. How many cigarettes can you smoke in a period of time? That's evidence too, Samantha.
They pointed to that as evidence that he was a professional because he was so cool and collected that he only smoked one pack of cigarettes
in 30 minutes.
I don't know if that's evidence. I don't know. Anyway.
That's evidence of nothing except how much someone else likes to smoke.
Yeah. Anyway, 5 months after Cooper's flight, $500,000 was extorted from another airline by another skyjacker. His name was Richard McCoy, who was a former Green Beret skydiver. He was sentenced to 45 years for air piracy, which is a really cool crime name, if you ask me.
Or band name. Is that taken? Air piracy?
That should be our band name, if we could sing.
And then if we could sing. And then our first album would be The Glory Days of Skyjacking.
He apparently escaped prison, but he was tracked down and killed in a gun battle with the FBI. They don't look alike. A lot of people said he must be D.B. Cooper, but he doesn't look like either the original sketch or Florence's new sketch.
They're both white guys, but other than that, I didn't see a lot of resemblance.
They don't look anything alike. That was pretty much everything in the Unsolved Mysteries segment.
And then
I went down some fucking deep internet rabbit holes.
Guys, it's been a long week.
So
Samantha is not the same person who was here last week.
Liz is worse off than I am, but we'll get to that.
It's true.
So if you Google D.B. Cooper, the first thing that comes up is a 2017 article about some new evidence that has surfaced. And there's a lot of clickbaity articles that say things like, has the mystery of D.B. Cooper been solved?
And then you scroll through 5 ads and it says no.
No, they found a piece of fabric in the mountains. It's likely that it was from a parachute harness, and maybe that was D.B. Cooper.
And no one else has ever parachuted in that area.
Well, here's the thing.
Despite the golden age of skyjacking.
They found $5,000 that's been confirmed that it was absolutely from D.B. Cooper, and they found the placard from the plane, and we're still nowhere near solving this mystery. So I don't know, even if they were definitively able to prove that the scrap of fabric was from D.B. Cooper's parachute harness, what does that prove?
We know he jumped out of the plane.
Right.
That's not the mystery.
Anything.
The mystery
he wouldn't have kept the... I don't know. So the reason I bring this up is because there's this guy who they call a sleuth. His name is Tom Colbert.
Wait, Samantha, are we sleuths?
I don't think so. Because we
Not even after this week?
No, because we haven't created dbcooper.com and written an entire book about how one guy is probably D.B. Cooper, which is what Tom Colbert has done. And so if you go to dbcooper.com, maybe you can last longer on that website than I did.
No,
it was
probably not.
It was so dense, and they had they have a lot of the book that he wrote, pictures of it on the website that you can read through.
That D.B. Cooper wrote?
I mean, the Colbert. Tom Colbert
Not that
wrote.
Dan Cooper wrote on his 30-minute flight while smoking a pack of cigarettes.
So I took one look at dbcooper.com and I immediately went to the Wikipedia article for this guy's book.
That's not for me.
I needed the Cliff Notes version. So Tom Colbert is convinced that D.B. Cooper is this guy named Rackstraw.
That is...
Where's his first name?
Not a real name. Rackstraw.
Yeah, let me find his real name. Robert Rackstraw, a 73-year-old Army veteran from San Diego with a prior criminal record. And if you look up Robert Rackstraw, his story is kind of bonkers. The book that Colbert wrote was The Last Master Outlaw, in case you're interested in learning more about this.
Not really.
And he... Well, Colbert recruited 40 retired investigators, including a dozen FBI agents, and they documented Rackstraw's trail through at least 20 states and 5 countries. For some reason, they call it a secret 5-year investigation. I don't know why he was keeping it a secret. I don't think he trusts the FBI.
Was it a secret, or just did no one care?
They also supposedly identified more than 100 pieces of new case evidence that allegedly point to Cooper being Rackstraw, including a 1970 Army ID picture that was later requested by the FBI. The FBI did look into this Rackstraw guy because...
But was it just because he had kind of a cool name?
No, so it was because, first of all, his name was Bob. He went by Bob.
Oh.
And he was
Not
a former...
Rackstraw.
Yeah. He was a former Army pilot and ex-convict. He had a distinguished military career in Vietnam, but he was dishonorably discharged for conducting unauthorized parachute jumps and lying about attending 2 universities.
Oh, well.
They said in
who hasn't done that?
This Wikipedia article that in the 1970s he was a deadbeat dad, a 4-time felon, an escape artist, and state prison convict.
I am going to get business cards printed that identify me as all of those things.
Even a deadbeat dad?
Yes.
Even though you have no children?
Yes.
But you are a MILF.
No, quit saying that. I can't catch on.
The FBI Cooper Task Force first became aware of Rackstraw because he had 2 fugitive runs, both involved getaway planes. One was a flight to Iran. The other one involved faking his own death in a Mayday crash over the Monterey Bay. He literally crashed a plane to pretend that he died to get away from, they said fugitive runs. I don't really know what he was doing. But here's the thing.
Not paying his child support?
Maybe. But in the 80s, he became a respectable member of society, and he became...
Okay, what?
He cleaned up his act. He got 3 degrees and became a respected university law instructor.
But he lied about those 2 degrees. Do you think he lied about the 3 degrees?
No, he's legit now, or he was. I'm not sure if he's still alive. But when the FBI finally decided to close the D.B. Cooper case, this Tom Colbert guy sued the FBI, trying to get them to keep the case open. And in his suit, he claimed that they were somehow ashamed of not catching this Rackstraw guy because they thought it would look bad on them or something. And Rackstraw's lawyer was quoted as saying it's literally the stupidest thing he's ever heard in his life. But part of it was kind of Rackstraw's fault because it sounded like he thought it was cool that people thought he was D.B. Cooper and he would go around telling people that he was.
Okay. Yep. That's there's really not helpful, but is highly amusing, and I could see myself probably doing the same thing.
Yeah, I probably would have. But here's the thing I don't understand. So the FBI, a couple years ago, there was an FBI agent that wanted to relook at the case. And the FBI apparently was like, sure, we're totally on board with that, but you can't spend any money on this because we have better things to do.
That's fair.
So he did something that was kind of unprecedented. It might still be pretty unprecedented. He released the entire, like all the evidence, the entire case file, everything to the public. And this group of people who called themselves the Citizen Sleuths sort of took up the case and started doing a lot of investigating. There was a lot of experts that looked into this evidence, which is why this just doesn't ring of a government cover-up to me.
Because they're like, look, if you want to solve this, go ahead. Yeah, here's everything we have.
They seem to have been relatively transparent about all of this. They just don't want to put any more resources into it because it's so cold. And it's really likely that he didn't survive. But the other thing, too, is you can go, like their website about the D.B. Cooper case with all the evidence on it is still active. It does say at the top that the case is closed, but they will accept new evidence if someone in the public comes across it.
If we become citizen sleuths?
And try and solve this. This might be the one we solve. I don't know.
Do you think they have special patches or handshakes if I become a citizen sleuth?
They have a website, which I'll get to in a second. But one of the pieces of evidence they have is his tie. He left his tie on the airplane, and apparently they were able to recover his DNA. So I don't understand, because lots of people have come forward either claiming that they themselves are D.B. Cooper or a relative is. And some of those people they've ruled out by testing this DNA. I don't know why they can't just test Rakshaw's DNA and put the whole thing to rest.
Yeah, that doesn't make any sense to me either.
I mean,
there was a time, obviously there was a time where you couldn't do DNA testing, but there was also a time where you needed a fairly large sample in order to do DNA testing, but that's no longer true. I feel like every other episode of Forensic Files is them realizing that they now have enough evidence to replicate and do DNA testing on. So surely they could rule out this Rackstraw guy, who seems like a character, but probably not D.B. Cooper.
Yeah, no, he wasn't, in all likelihood. A bunch of other people have come forward, including a woman, apparently claiming that they're D.B. Cooper. I'm not going to go through all of those.
Okay.
There's one I will mention. Apparently, there's a kind of batshit theory that John List, the famous family annihilator, was D.B. Cooper. And it's kind of...
That seems like
it's extremely crazy. He killed people.
I don't see any similarities between these crimes whatsoever. But murdering your whole family, hijacking a plane.
List had spent, specifically, he spent the last $200,000 of his mom's savings account shortly before he killed his whole family. And they think that the fact that Cooper demanded and received $200,000 means that he was John List.
That's a stretch.
No, he wasn't.
That's a very round sum of money. It's not... No, that's not a clue at all. That's only a clue if you want it to be a clue.
Yeah.
To everyone else, that's not even a coincidence.
The other thing about this case is it's so vague that you can kind of pick out details and point to just about anyone being D.B. Cooper. So
who do you think is D.B. Cooper then?
I think D.B. Cooper's dead, but here we're going to get to it.
Okay.
So the Citizen Sleuths have a website as well, where they outline all of the evidence they have. There's also a History Channel documentary. It's one of the first ones that come up on YouTube, and a lot of what that documentary talks about is the work that citizens have done trying to solve this case. And what I found especially helpful about the Citizen Sleuths website was that they had a page that basically said everything you need to know about D.B. Cooper in 5 minutes, which appeals to me.
Because you had already done so much research.
Yes.
You're like, could I just give this 5 more minutes and be done, please?
Right. So they lay out all of they call them debate points, which I think is the right way to call them, because like I said, all of the evidence, the little evidence that exists in this case, can be looked at by both sides as proof, or at least evidence to suggest that he's either alive or dead. So the first one is the parachute, and whether or not he was an experienced skydiver. So I found conflicting things about this. So one FBI agent said that no experienced parachutist could have jumped in the pitch black night in the rain with a 200-mile-an-hour wind in his face, wearing loafers and a trench coat. It was simply too risky. He also missed that his reserve chute was only used for training and had been sewn shut. A skilled skydiver would have checked. Then other people said, basically, that if he was a moderately good skydiver, if he had skydived a few times, he could have potentially survived. If he was an experienced skydiver, he would have for sure survived. And if he was a novice or had never done it, he would have died. So it's really not clear to me. There are a couple things. He asked for specifically military parachutes, which a lot of people point to as him having military skydiving experience.
Not necessarily.
No, because here's the other thing. One of the documentaries I watched, they interviewed a master rigger, which is someone whose whole job is to rig parachutes.
Oh, okay.
And they had this guy, this was the actual guy who rigged the parachutes that were given to D.B. Cooper.
Oh.
And he said a couple things. The first thing he said is that the fact that D.B. Cooper asked for backpacks and front packs, that's not the language. That's not what they're actually called.
Oh.
That's not the military jargon.
Sure.
I don't know if that's proof one way
yeah.
or another, but he said that's not what we call them.
That's interesting.
He also gave him a variety of types of parachutes to choose from, and the one he picked was like the worst one you could have picked. It apparently was really heavy and cumbersome, and once the parachute was open, you couldn't maneuver it. So if you were going to fly into a lake, for instance, you couldn't take a different path. You were going to fall where you're going to fall.
That was almost like a little test. Oh yeah, you want a parachute? Which one?
Kind of.
Oh, that one?
And that was the one that had the reserve chute sewed shut. So if the first parachute didn't work, he wouldn't be able to get the reserve chute.
Right.
The thing you pull to launch the parachute, apparently on this type of parachute, is really flat against your body. And when it's cold and you're not wearing gloves,
it's hard to find.
It's hard to find and grab. When you're in the wind, it's a scary situation. The guy they interviewed was basically like, I have no idea why he would have picked that parachute. I think it's
he didn't know better, maybe.
Or maybe it's the only one he used in the military. Maybe it's the one he had the most familiarity with. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't think it necessarily means that he was a novice. It seems to lean that way, but it kind of doesn't matter, and we'll get to why in a second. The money they found. So it's kind of problematic because when they initially found this money, they thought that the area where the money was found had been dredged after D.B. Cooper, like several years after D.B. Cooper landed. That means if that were true, if that area had been dredged, for the money to be found buried shallowly in the sandbar, someone would have had to put it there years later after it had been dredged.
Interesting.
Actually, that part of the river had been dredged, but the specific area where the money was found, the dredging stopped short of that. So that area, the money could have shown up there the day that he jumped out of the plane. Okay. The other thing about the money is, yes, it was upstream on the Columbian River from where he could have landed, but they said in a documentary I watched that river was an extremely busy shipping lane at the time. So it's perfectly possible that if he landed in the water and died, that the parachute, all of that rope, could have gotten caught up in a boat and just pulled upriver. And then that's how it ended up upriver. So it doesn't seem to really prove anything.
None of this proves anything.
There's another thing.
If only you could see Samantha's sad face right now, listeners.
I have so much research in front of me that I'm trying to kind of sort it out.
The real question is, Brian, what do you think happened to D.B. Cooper? Since this is your favorite mystery, surely you have a theory. Is he alive? Is he dead? Are you D.B. Cooper?
Yeah, there was another thing that they wonder, was Cooper from the area? He recognized Tacoma from the air, which seems to suggest that he was local. But also they think he would be an idiot to hijack an airplane where he could possibly be recognized. So that suggests that maybe he wasn't from the area. He made a very unusual request for negotiable American currency, which seems people think that means that he wasn't from the United States. But he didn't have an accent, so who knows? This is why I think that he probably perished. So first of all, they had an extensive search of the area. They were pretty certain they narrowed down the area where he jumped. Mm-hmm. And they searched it extremely thoroughly, very shortly after he jumped. The other thing is that one of the citizen sleuths was an expert who said that regardless of whether he was an experienced skydiver or not, he was wearing a parachute that you couldn't maneuver. And based on their calculations, whether he opened the parachute shortly after he jumped out of the plane or whether he opened it right above the ground, either of those would have taken him either to the lake or the Columbia River. So it seems extremely likely that he landed in water no matter how experienced he was
And he's using this parachute that's hard to maneuver.
Yeah, so he was going to land where he was going to land. And based on calculations that people have done, it would have been in the water in November. He was wearing a heavy parachute.
With the weight of the money.
Ropes. He had a 21-pound bag of money strapped to his body.
He's wearing loafers.
It's extremely unlikely. Yeah, he was wearing a suit. It's not likely that he...
We don't know what he had under his suit, Samantha.
Yeah, the FBI agent in Unsolved Mysteries said he could have had long underwear underneath.
He should have been wearing long underwear.
That's still not preparing him to land in ice-cold water.
No, but this guy really, really wanted to believe that D.B. Cooper was alive and awesome.
A lot of people want to believe that he played the system, that he was an exotic hijacker.
Man of mystery.
Yeah, they really romanticize him, and that a lot of people want to believe that he really did make off with $200,000 and he's sipping margaritas on a beach in Mexico. I just think that's really unlikely. He probably landed in water and he probably got hypothermia and died. And the Columbia River eventually goes to the ocean. So the fact that they never found his body...
That was going to be my question. Then where's
his body? Does not mean that he didn't die. A lot of people point to the fact that there's no body, so he must be alive. Well, he could be at the bottom of the ocean because one of the ships or boats, whatever the fuck, could have taken him there.
One of the ship boats, a subject we're experts on, could have taken him to the ocean.
So I haven't done a ton of scholarly research on this. That Colbert guy apparently has 100 pieces of evidence to suggest that someone else is D.B. Cooper. I just think the likely scenario is that he died.
Every time you say Colbert, I picture Stephen Colbert.
I know. I don't know if that's how Tom actually pronounces his name, but that's how I
hope
did
it is. I hope they're related, or I hope they're the same person. I hope this is Stephen Colbert's hobby. When he's not hosting that night show,
he has dedicated his life to harassing Tom Rackshaw.
Yes.
Or Bob Rackshaw.
That's what I'm picturing in my mind, and I like it.
So this case was pretty interesting, I have to admit. I didn't think I was going to find it as interesting as I did. It is more exciting to think that he made it out alive, but
it seems unlikely.
I don't think. I mean, a lot of people point to the fact that there were other successful, like that McCoy guy successfully jumped out of a plane, but he also landed on land and not in water. So I don't think the fact that he survived is evidence that D.B. Cooper definitely survived.
Listening to you, it sounds like all the experts say he probably didn't make it. And the amateurs
I'm sure
say,
Tom Colbert considers himself an expert.
Yeah, but he's like a self-proclaimed expert. He's not a skydiving expert.
Right.
He's not someone with a military expertise in skydiving or something.
Yeah.
It sounds like the people who know what they're talking about go, yeah, I don't see how he would have made it at night in the rain, in loafers, in this and that. And the amateurs just want to believe that it's true because it's a cool story.
In all likelihood, he landed in water.
He's probably dead.
So he's probably dead, which is unfortunate.
Yeah.
That's it.
I would like to hear other people's D.B. Cooper theories.
I would too. Because, I mean, I've heard a lot already, but...
So yeah, Samantha's probably like, I don't want to...
kind of D.B. Cooper'd out. As fascinating as I found it, I'm kind of done with this one.
Yeah, you need a break. You're not Stephen Colbert. You're not willing to devote your life to investigating D.B. Cooper. You did put a lot of work into this mystery. Thank you.
Are you ready to talk about all the work you put into yours?
My Lord. Oh, where to even begin with this case?
If you could see Liz right now, she looks so exhausted.
I'm honestly like covering my eyes going like, oh, what am I going to do? So
I don't know where you're going to begin.
I don't even know.
I have listened to a podcast about this before I even started watching Unsolved Mysteries. And so when I saw that this was the case in this episode, I immediately sent Liz a text and I was like, get ready to go down some internet rabbit holes on this one.
Even with
good luck. I don't know what you're gonna do.
Even with that warning, I was not prepared, and at some point sent Samantha a message that just said, "Oh fuck my mystery."
She did. That's an actual text I received.
Where she was like, "Oh no, what's wrong?" And
I knew exactly what was wrong.
So Samantha already knew what I was getting into. This is how, let me prove to you how devoted to podcasting Samantha is. Samantha, what kind of music do you listen to?
I don't listen to music.
Because you're listening to podcasts?
Yes. And audiobooks, actually. I literally I couldn't even name a popular song right now.
So Samantha already knew that I should listen to the True Crime Garage episodes.
Yes. The Boys on the Tracks. It's a 4-part series.
It's a 4-part series.
If you want to know more, because we're not going to be able to cover everything.
That's the thing.
Go listen to that podcast. It's really well done.
I feel overwhelmed at the moment because this case goes into such bizarre territory.
Yeah.
And we don't have time. They did a 4-episode show on this case, and even they said there's even more to this than we can cover. But let's start with Unsolved Mysteries. We'll go from there.
Yep.
And we'll see what crazy rabbit holes we go down. So it's an unexplained death. It's from August of 87. A Union Pacific train is driving along at night, heading into Byron, Arkansas, which is a small town, at 52 miles an hour. It's a long train. It's pulling 75 cars of cargo.
Cars,
yeah. And Stephen Schroyer is the train engineer, and he sees something on the track. And he realizes that it's actually 2 people lying on the track under a tarp beside a gun. So it's
kind of sounded like the tarp was on them, sort of like a blanket, like over their
it's
laps.
Like completely covering them.
Yeah, partially.
It's partially covering them. Maybe the wind blew it. I don't know. But they're partially covered by a tarp. That's going to come into play later. Just remember that little factoid. So he pulls the emergency brake. There's 3 crew members on the freight train. They all do everything by protocol. Unfortunately, for a train that size going that fast, to stop takes half a mile.
Yeah.
So
they were going to hit them.
They were going to hit them, and they did what they could. They blared the emergency horn. They followed procedure, but there just isn't that much time, and they run over these 2 people on the track.
Who didn't flinch, right? So the train was coming at them. They were blowing the horn, hoping if they were laying on the tracks for some reason, they would get up, and they didn't move a muscle.
Try to imagine yourself in that situation where it's pitch black at night. You're lying, say me and Samantha are lying on a train track, on the train tracks, parallel to each other, right? Yep. So our heads are on inside one side of the track, and then our legs are going over the other. And we're laying perfectly still. A train is barring down on us. Is that the phrase?
Yeah.
And we don't even look at it.
We don't flinch.
We don't flinch. We don't move. I don't turn to Samantha and go, why did we think this was a good idea? Right? Like, we just lie there completely still as the train runs over us. Awful, right? And that's awful for these 2 people. It's also awful for the people on the train that know that this is inevitable and there's nothing they can do to stop it. The 2 boys, as it turned out, were Don Henry and Kevin Ivey. I think one was 16, one was 17. They were high school seniors. At first, this death is ruled as an accident or suicide. The scene is not secured.
No.
Which is really unfortunate. It's treated as like a traffic accident and not as possible foul play, which in any circumstance like this, you really have to eliminate the possibility of foul play first. And then if you find out it's really an accident, you already have that evidence. Turns out you didn't need it, opposed to the other way around.
Right. Apparently there was a state police officer there. It was not his jurisdiction. He just showed up to help. And he is quoted as observing some strange behavior on the part of the sheriff's department, including the fact that they immediately started investigating it like an accident.
Yeah.
Which the fact of the matter is that in that situation, you only get one chance to collect evidence. So treating it like possible homicide initially, if it ends up not to be that, okay, that's not. You at least, if it ends up that it is, you have that evidence.
You can't go back and correct that initial mistake and have a secure scene and have collected the evidence. Unsolved Mysteries clearly is not a show that wants to disparage a police force, but even Unsolved Mysteries is like, there's something going on here. Yeah. Like, this wasn't handled well. And the first medical examiner that... Fahmy Malik, who is involved in a few suspicious cases and is a little bit of a notorious name in some conspiracy theories and such, he rules that this death is related to the boys smoking 20 marijuana cigarettes.
Each. Not 10 each, 20 each.
Which, I'm going to admit that I'm not cool and I don't smoke.
Neither do I. Nor have I ever. But I still know.
That's a lie. That's a lot.
If that's a 16-year-old even had that much.
That's a lot of money.
Yeah.
Also, smoking 20 joints doesn't make you unafraid of trains?
Yeah, he said, this medical examiner said not only did they smoke 20 joints each, but that made them lay down and fall asleep on the railroad tracks.
Yeah, perfectly still in parallel lines.
And not surprisingly, their parents were like, what?
Yeah, their parents, kudos to them, really stood up to this report. They stood up to the fact that it was ruled as an accident. They stood up to the fact that their sons were being blamed for smoking pot and just said, this doesn't add up. This doesn't make sense. The things that you're telling us don't compute. You want to dismiss this and move on instead of actually investigating. There's one of the fathers said in Unsolved Mysteries, and I absolutely love this detail, that he said his son would not have laid his gun down on the gravel because it would have scratched the wood.
Yeah.
Like, he's like, I know. Sure, okay, maybe my son got high and laid on some railroad tracks, but there's no way. There's no way he just set his gun down on the ground.
That was the weird part, too, because the gun was like, if you can imagine a third person laying with them, the gun was parallel with the boys. Even if they did lay down and fall asleep on the railroad tracks.
They line it perfectly up.
Yeah.
And I just think that little detail shows someone who knows their kid.
Yeah.
Like, you're telling me all this other bullshit that doesn't make any sense, that my kid smoked 20 joints in a single evening and passed out on railroad tracks, but you're also telling me that he set his prized gun down on this gravel,
right, and
would have let it get scratched or run over by a train? No. It turns out that the boys were together. They were staying at, I think it's Ives' house. I'm not sure. It doesn't really matter.
Yeah, I don't know.
They were together for the night, and they were planning to go spotlighting, which is a form of illegal hunting where you shine light on animals so they freeze, and then you shoot them. So that's why they were out at night.
With a gun.
It was a .22 rifle. It's a small gun.
It sounded like it was a popular thing that kids in the area did.
Yeah.
Go spotlighting.
One of the parents knew they were going spotlighting and was like, yeah, great, go have fun.
Yeah.
Didn't seem like a big... It's illegal hunting. I don't think they had a hunting license. That form of hunting is illegal, but whatever. They're just kids. They're out. They're messing around. They don't come back all night. Their parents start to get worried, and then it turns out that they are crushed by a train.
Yeah.
Unsolved Mysteries talks about someone seeing a weird man in military fatigues and how that might be connected to the case. I don't think that has anything to do with anything.
Well, there's no evidence.
That's just a total red herring. The other thing, I think because this Unsolved Mysteries aired shortly after this happened, Robert Stack tells you, after filming this segment, the parents had petitioned for another autopsy, an autopsy that made goddamn sense, right? And they had to get someone to come out of state. They fought hard to get that. Yeah. They were really resisted on the...
They might have even paid for it themselves.
So they got someone else to come and look at the bodies. And they said, one of these boys was stabbed. So Robert Stack mentions that at the end of the segment, like, hey, we might have some information on why these boys, the mystery of why these boys didn't move while a train was coming at them.
They were already dead.
They were already dead.
Yeah.
Which you kind of knew.
Yeah.
They had to be dead or unconscious. And the train crew...
The train crew knew it.
That there's just no way they wouldn't have moved.
No.
And also...
Well, I don't know if you're going to get to the other details about the crime scene, like the blood and stuff.
Yes.
Okay, I'll save it for that then.
Yes, because that's not covered on Unsolved Mysteries. I'm sure they wanted to...
They kept it a little more family
They wanted to make it a little less gross. The police tell the train crew that they're wrong, that there wasn't a tarp.
And there wasn't a gun.
There wasn't a gun, and that the boys were alive. And the train crew's like, no, we don't buy that. The parents don't buy that. And Unsolved Mysteries is kind of like, what's happening in this case, right? Mm-hmm. Well...
Is this where your extra research came in?
That's where I was unprepared, despite Samantha's warning about the internet rabbit hole that I was about to go down. Samantha, do you know who actually murdered those boys?
Could it have been the Clintons?
It was Hillary Rodham Clinton. Herself who did it. Because after watching this episode and going like, that's kind of an interesting mystery. I wonder what did happen to those boys. I wonder what Samantha's alluding to. I will go to unsolved.com and read the comments.
It's a good place to start.
Oh, holy shit. About half of them are about the Clintons and how the Clintons pretty much personally killed those boys. And right now you're going,
because Bill Clinton was the governor of Arkansas at the time.
Yes.
So it's not completely out of nowhere. And this does smell a little like a police cover-up, but there's a lot of people who are like, it goes all the way to the governor's office. Bill Clinton himself told Fahmy Malik that these boys must have smoked 40 joints. I mean, it's ridiculous.
It gets pretty wacky very quickly, where the Clintons personally murdered them to cover up their child pornography ring.
For some reason, people blame the Clintons for literally everything. The Clintons killed John Bonet. The Clintons did... it's ridiculous. We're not even going to talk about Pizzagate. I know your husband would like us to.
He would. He has a lot of Pizzagate-related observations. There's not a crazy...
We don't have time.
No. That's the thing with this case, though, is it spreads out into so many directions.
Yeah.
So... Bill Clinton is the governor of Arkansas at this time. He is clearly planning to run for president. There is some level of police cover-up.
Yeah, because there's a lot that Unsolved Mysteries left out about how the sheriffs royally fucked up this investigation.
Yeah, they did such a bad job that I don't think they lost that tarp. I think they purposely disposed of it.
Yep.
They didn't secure the scene. They didn't even... This is awful. They didn't pick up all of the body parts of the boys.
Nope.
So people from the town who later went by to check it out and see what was happening found toes and bits of them.
Yep.
Family members found a large piece of cardboard that appeared to have blood on it that looked like something that could have been used to drag the boys' bodies to the tracks, because they're 17, 16 years old. They're going to be heavy and hard to carry, right? Yeah. Way easier to drag them. That piece of evidence is handed over to the police. Never seen again. That's not entered into evidence. That no longer exists. That can't be tested for DNA or anything like that. That's just gone.
There was no blood. The train conductor, this is kind of morbid, but the train conductor said they hit animals all the time. And when they hit live animals like deer or dogs, there's a lot of bright red blood. And both the train conductors and the EMTs that showed up said it looked like they had hit mannequins, because there was hardly any blood, and the blood that was there was purple and
it was already congealed.
Yeah.
So they're saying to the cops, this is weird, but we really expected there to be a lot more blood.
If they had been alive, if they had fallen asleep on the tracks, there would be fresh blood.
When we finally got the train to stop and we got off and walked back half a mile to see what had happened, we thought we were going to come across a very bloody scene. Mm-hmm. And instead, we just came upon body parts. And that's odd. And you should look into that.
It shocked me that even the medical professionals who showed up, the EMTs, said, this does not look like live victims.
This is not what you're saying. These people's hearts were not beating seconds before they were hit by the train.
But at the scene, the police were like, no.
This is just an accident.
They let another train go through?
Yes.
That shocked me. A crime scene. You let a train drive through a crime scene.
Because they clearly didn't care. They didn't care about preserving the scene. So then you think, why didn't they care about preserving the scene?
Right.
Post Unsolved Mysteries, in the years that followed, a few eyewitnesses came forward. Why did it take them a while to come forward? Because they were afraid. And who were they going to report it to? One eyewitness sees these two boys get into an altercation with police officers where, quote, the police officers were beating the shit out of them. This was hours previous to their deaths, right? Mm-hmm. Who do you report that to? If the police are corrupt in your small town, then what are you supposed to do with that information? And also, you're scared for yourself. So that eyewitness took a while to come forward and eventually said, hey, actually, I know that these two teens had an altercation with the police, and then the police didn't really seem that interested in figuring out how they died.
Yeah.
There was another eyewitness that came forward to say that he had seen 3 figures down at the tracks right before their deaths, one of them being the prosecutor of the case.
Here's a wild turn.
Dan Harmon, not to be confused with the creator of the TV show Community. He was the prosecutor in this area and also the person in charge of that case, which is just wild. Yeah. That is such a twist. How did he recognize that was Dan Harmon? Dan Harmon used to date his mom.
Yep.
We're talking about an area with, I think they said 5,000 people.
Yeah.
You're going to know the people around town, right?
Especially if your mom dated him.
Particularly if your mom dated him, and particularly if he's a powerful person, right?
Sounds like kind of a dick.
It seems like a total douchebag. So he sees Dan Harmon at the tracks with two figures who he believes to be cops just hours before these boys' bodies are found.
Yeah.
Here's the thing. We don't know exactly what happened. We do know that Dan Harmon, he was tried for drug offenses and corruption, so I feel fine.
Right, because what we do know is that there was a lot of drug trafficking going on in this area. So much so that there was, like, airplanes that would land in fields and drop off drugs. It's kind of ridiculous.
This is part of why people bring in Bill Clinton. So this area of Arkansas was known for drug trafficking as a huge billion-dollar cocaine business, which is speculated to be brought in by CIA planes. It's
speculated by who? The same people who think Bill Clinton murdered those boys?
No, that seems much more accepted.
Oh, okay.
Not that the CIA itself is an organization is smuggling drugs, but pilots who worked for the CIA were like, well, I got this plane.
Side business, dropping off coke.
Right. I already have to fly to Nicaragua. Why don't I come back with some cocaine? When I started reading about this, I was like, well, these boys are killed in Byron, Arkansas. Everybody keeps talking about Mena, Arkansas, which is where the airport is. That's a 2-hour drive away. I looked up in Google. I was like, it would take you 2 days to walk there. I was like, well, the boys didn't just stumble. They didn't go out for their night of hunting and then stumble into this drug ring. But what it seems happened is that there was an airstrip in Byron where planes would make unregistered stops before actually going to the Mena airport, right?
Okay.
So you're flying back from overseas with your drugs. You can't go straight to the airport.
Right, because you have drugs.
That's how the drug business works, folks. So they would make...
I got it figured out. All
yeah,
right.
So they would make a quick stop in Byron to drop off those drugs with their lights off or who knows what, right? And then they would actually go to the Mena airport. Because at first I was like, there's no way this airport is connected. It's so far away. I don't understand what all these people are talking about.
Okay, that makes more sense to me.
So they're making a drug drop-off. It seems like that's by the train tracks. I don't know if the train involved. Are you taking the drugs from the airplane to a train, and that's how you're moving them around or something?
I don't know, maybe.
I probably have confused everyone. This is so complicated, and people's
convoluted
theories go in every direction. Like, you could just do a thing on, we could devote a whole book, I think people have, on the possible drug trafficking through the Mena airport. Like, that's a whole other thing and a whole other mystery. Well, because of the later charges related to both drugs and corruption, it seems like Dan Harmon despite being the prosecutor, was also running a drug ring. So
it's not, the fact that they have witnesses down by the tracks where the boys ended up.
Yeah.
They could have seen something that they were in the wrong place at the wrong time.
That's my theory. Whether they were out illegally hunting or what, they're teenage boys. They're out. They're messing around. Maybe they know something shady and weird is happening over the train tracks and they go to check it out. That's exactly the sort of dumb thing a 16-year-old's going to do.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
They're running around at night and maybe they just end up... They see something they're not supposed to see. Dan Harmon thinks they're trying to rip him off. Who knows? They're in the wrong place at the wrong time. It seems like at least some portion of the police force there was corrupt and working for Dan Harmon is like his muscle. Mm-hmm. They get into a fight with the boys. Maybe one of the boys ends up dead. They have to kill the other one. They end up putting them on the tracks.
Yeah.
Dan Harmon was not just a known drug kingpin. He was also a known cokehead. Yeah. So this could very well happen while he's coked up.
Right. And, of course.
Yeah, and he thinks that they're up to something. They were found with like a tiny amount of pot.
Yeah.
So people were
40 spent joints?
No, not. They did not smoke 40 joints. One of them had a tiny amount of pot in their pocket. It does seem like they probably bought some pot that night. Oh, well, like, who cares? That is nothing.
Certainly not enough to make you fall asleep.
I don't think that amount exists. I would believe it more if they were drunk and fell asleep on the tracks. It's total. That's the part to me, in looking into it, and I hope I've talked about it in some vaguely followable manner, because it was really hard to figure out what is speculation and what has any proof behind it. Even with reputable sources, it was hard to separate their theories of what happened from things that there's really any concrete proof.
Yep.
And a week was not enough time. For me to
Forever is not enough time.
for me to get to the bottom of this. So, bear with me. I started watching a really low rent documentary on YouTube, and I got like 5 minutes in before it got racist. I'm not even kidding. And I was like, okay, not watching that. If this is a case that you're interested in, definitely listen to the True Crime Garage. They do a great job, and they're a 4-part series. There's also a book called The Boys on the Tracks by Mara Leverett, who also wrote a book about the West Memphis 3. That's supposed to be good. But again, that's an entire book.
Yeah, we have one segment of one podcast.
Case. Okay, the part that I don't understand is why Dr. Malik, I just wrote down, is the worst on earth.
Fahmy, the original medical examiner.
Yeah, why the original medical examiner? So say that he's paid off by Dan Harmon.
Right, a lot of people are saying he was paid off to make this ruling.
Yeah, why did he make something that makes no sense? He couldn't have picked a better lie than that?
For some reason, he really seemed, based on how it was described in things like True Crime Garage, it seemed like he really thought people would just buy the fact that they were that stoned.
He seemed extremely arrogant, and I think was just expecting, like, no one's going to question me. I'm a doctor.
Right. And maybe he just didn't... Did he understand how marijuana works?
I don't think so. That's something Mac also said. It was like, this is like a really old man, and he's like, oh, they smoked.
He said they were under the psychedelic influence of THC.
20 marijuana cigarettes,
it's
which
not
they
a
kept calling them.
psychedelic. Like,
yeah,
I don't do drugs, and I know that. Like,
there's another case they talked about on True Crime Garage where Dr. Malik had ruled that someone had died of an ulcer. What was the problem with that, Samantha, that ruling?
He lost his head.
Yeah, he was also decapitated. I feel like losing your head...
happens when you have an ulcer, your head just falls off.
I feel like losing your head is going to kill you before the ulcer gets you. And then his explanation, when people were like, yeah, where's the head then? He was like, his dog ate it and regurgitated it.
Ugh, it was bizarre.
What? Dog? What? And people were like, really? With this like clean cut line that's a dog ate a head, and he was just like, yep. He like really doubled down on it.
The dog was also a surgeon.
Apparently there's a lot of weird rulings from him like that.
Where he had ruled unnatural deaths natural. Like people who had hung themselves.
People who were clearly murdered.
Yeah.
There also, we don't have time to get into this, but there are several witnesses involved in this Boys on the Tracks case end up dying under suspicious circumstances. Mm-hmm. Dr. Malik is the medical examiner for a few of those. One of them he claims is a motorcycle accident, except that, his throat was slit. That's what, like, make something up that makes sense.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a really weird case. There's a witness that gets stabbed 100 times. There's a witness that people in clown outfits break into his head. It goes so many places.
It's wild, you guys.
It's totally wild, and that's why I know that Hillary Clinton is the real murderer. Yep.
No.
The reason people think that is they assume that because, as governor, Bill Clinton did not remove Dr. Malik as the medical examiner. In fact, he got promoted and he got a raise.
He got a raise, but he ended up only making like $60,000 a year.
Yeah. But I also feel like that's probably a lot of money there. So
yeah,
I don't know. But I'll say I'm not. Oh God, send hate mail to me and not to Samantha. For what I'm not the biggest fan of either of the Clintons. I don't think that they're murderers.
No.
I think at the worst, Bill Clinton was like, I'm going to run for president. I don't want to get involved in this. Like, this is not politically advantageous for me to point out that this is suspicious.
At worst, he neglected to...
He looked the other way, or he failed to get involved in something that he thought he didn't want to admit was happening on his watch or whatever.
Something.
People want to think... If Hillary Clinton is that goddamn powerful, she would not have lost 2 presidential elections, people. She would be president right now if she had that kind of control over everything. If you believe internet commenters. I mean...
And if you believe internet commenters, the Clintons are that powerful. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, and they're just... Are they people who are extremely interested in their own careers? Yes. Yeah. I would say that they're probably pretty selfish people.
Yeah, at the expense of these families, probably. But does that mean they were... had a hand in the cover-up.
Do I think that Hillary Clinton, from the way people were talking, was literally down at the tracks shoving a boy's body so a train would hit it? No. I'm going to say I don't believe that.
No.
We don't know exactly what happened. It's a shame that the case is closed and that they're not investigating it.
I could be convinced, and I think I frankly am convinced, that there was a cover-up to some extent in the sheriff's department.
I think so.
But did it go any higher than that? I doubt it.
Yeah. Is it the sheriffs themselves that possibly killed the boys after an altercation? Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like it could have been.
We don't know who the actual murderers were, and it doesn't seem like we will. And the parents have been keeping this case alive and still pushing for some justice, and it doesn't seem like they're going to get it, which is very tragic. And I commend them for fighting City Hall, or however you want to phrase it. And they actually, after the first autopsy and ridiculous medical ruling, held a press conference to say
that this is bullshit.
This is bullshit. This is not how our sons died. And that got the case reopened and got more attention. And I think that was a ballsy move.
It got the case opened by Dan Harmon.
Yeah.
Which is a turn we're not going to go far down. But it did seem
kind of a brilliant move, though, where he was like, you're right. Your sons probably were murdered. Let me help you and let me take care of it. And it turns out, like, oh, he's probably, like, really involved.
Yeah.
I'm not aware of another case like this where it turns out the prosecutor is actually either the murderer or involved in the
covering
cover-up.
it up. It's wild.
It's something out of a terrible Nicolas Cage movie. Or
honestly,
it's just crazy.
If you pitched this idea for a fiction novel, people would be like, you're trying too hard.
Yeah, you're like, of course, it's the
Right, because it's stranger than fiction in a lot of ways.
Yeah. It's like, and then did it turn out he was literally possessed by the devil? Because this is, like, at this point, it's so over the top that...
Yeah, it's crazy.
It's really crazy. And I probably got some facts wrong on that one because I'm just, like Samantha, drowning in information about this case. It's really wild.
Yeah.
But I think also trying to blame the Clintons because you hate the Clintons and you want to blame them for stuff, you're losing sight of the fact that 2 boys are dead.
Yeah.
And you're losing sight of the fact that those poor people on the train were traumatized and their family, like, there's a lot of victims that are sort of being callously used to make propaganda about why Bill Clinton is a child molester. Which, that's how we'll end that. That's how
you want to talk about sports memorabilia now?
Never.
You guys.
One thing I never want to talk about, it's sports. And the memorabilia associated with it.
If there's anything I could possibly hate more than treasure hunting stories, it's anything about sports memorabilia. But here we go. There's one more mystery in this episode, folks.
It's a long one.
It's a long one, but I don't know how much I'm going to have to say about it. I was so exhausted after doing all that DB Cooper research.
Yeah, we did, like, no research
that I was like,
one.
Sports? Okay.
Whatever.
I mean, I did a little. We'll talk about it. So this is a fraud case. Here's what happened. So, first of all, did you know that sports memorabilia is like a multi-billion-dollar industry?
I'm not surprised
I guess,
because old white men have too much money.
Holy shit. So, yeah, Dennis Walker was a guy who amassed a trove of sports memorabilia valued at nearly $10 million, and the entire collection is missing. Here's what happened.
And I don't have it. I'm going to say that right now.
No one would suspect this. Did you ever do sports?
No.
No, neither.
I'm a picked last in gym class kind of kid.
Sports. This should indicate how little we care about sports.
Did you ever play the basketball, Liz? No, I didn't. I literally was picked last for gym class all the time. It was extremely traumatic. I hate everything about sports.
Yep, I took power walking as an elective gym class in college.
Oh, me too.
Yeah.
We had to make journals.
Literally walking was a
that's
how averse I am to any kind of physical activity.
That's one of the things we have in common. It's this, true crime, RuPaul's Drag Race, and a complete faith in Korean skincare. That's what binds us together.
It pretty much is, yeah. So in June 1980, Dennis Walker quit his job as a science teacher in Oregon. He set up an investment company.
So fishy, right? Like off the bat.
I'm doing air quotes around investment company in Medford, Oregon. Robert Stack said that he concocted a grandiose investment scheme. Among other things, he opened up his own bank in the South Pacific island of Tonga.
I didn't even know you could do that.
I guess you can. He did. He offered a 25% interest rate on investments, and at first he actually did pay off his early investors on schedule. And more than 140 people, like right off the bat, gave him more than $7 million.
That's...
Yeah, and
okay.
So it was a Ponzi scheme. Basically, his scam was this. He, as described by a police officer, someone would give him, say, like $10,000, and he would claim that he'd give them back $12,500. But he didn't actually give them that money. He just gave them like an IOU on a slip of paper. It said, in a year, I owe you this money. And he fooled a lot of people, including all of his employees who invested money with him.
I felt bad for that one employee that they interviewed.
They had so much faith in him.
I don't really know why. No, because he must have been very charismatic in some way.
I guess. What he did was he took all that money and he bought rare and expensive sports memorabilia. Robert Stack said it was like he was acting out his childhood fantasy.
It's exactly like that. It's if he was scamming people so that he could just go do whatever he ever wanted. Yeah.
Yeah, pretty much.
I used to be a kid and sit around and think, how great would it be if I had the first baseball card ever? Well, give me all your money and I'll go do it.
Yeah, and for some reason his employees / investors found it, like, they said comforting that he had all their money tied up in $22 million worth of baseball collectibles.
Yeah, because there's no way that could just, like, burn down.
Or disappear.
Yeah.
Which is what it's gonna do. He built one of the most prized collections in the country, and he even created his own sports hall of fame.
Which I just wrote, opening your own sports hall of fame is insane, and then I underlined insane a few times. It's such a, like, megalomaniac thing to do.
Yeah, here are some of the things that he had, and a lot of these mean nothing to me, but I'm going to read them because they'll probably mean something to one of you.
These are rare sportsy things, you guys.
Babe Ruth's ring, Mickey Mantle's uniform, Pete Rose's silver bat, Babe Ruth's New York Yankees uniform, a sheet of uncut baseball cards worth $10,000.
Who is paying that for uncut baseball cards?
Dennis, I guess. 2 Honus Wagner baseball cards from the year 1910 that were worth $70,000. Pete Rose's diamond-studded ring worth $30,000. That's just some of the things he had in his museum. Which is crazy. And at some point, the state of Oregon was like, this seems like a racket. So they started investigating. Apparently, no one complained. Like, people weren't getting their money, but they were kind of, like, fine with it because they're like, well, he has it in all of these.
He's taken my money and he put it in uncut baseball cards, and that seems to be a great idea.
I guess I'll get it back. Yeah, so they eventually gathered enough evidence on him to prosecute him for the illegal sale of unregistered securities. He never appeared in court, though. He got all his employees to help pack up his collection. Then one of his employees said an offensive racist phrase, and Walker drove the collection away, and it was never seen again. So
that's what happened to all of my sports collectibles as well.
Yeah, weird, huh? So they think he died in a Las Vegas hotel. They found his decomposing body. He had registered under a different name, but there was a prescription bottle with the name Dennis Walker on it. And they compared autopsy photos to photos of him, and they also looked at dental records. So it was him. They couldn't figure out how he died because he was so decomposed or something. Ew. And in Unsolved Mysteries, Robert Stack says no one knows what happened to him. They, over the years, recovered some of the stuff, but only a fraction. So they recovered Babe Ruth's uniform and Babe Ruth's World Series ring, but a lot of it is just missing. I went on the internet to try and do some additional research. There's a website called Hall of Shame that you can go and look at.
Of course there is.
It was super dense. At one point, it claimed that Charlie Sheen has a bunch of this stuff. I don't really know how. I was trying to follow the logic.
I buy that. No, I buy it. Yep. Okay, mystery solved. Charlie Sheen has it. Got it.
I was trying to follow the logic, but they kept throwing around names of athletes and sports memorabilia collectors. Like, I would just know who they are. And if you're going to that website, you probably do know who they are.
You don't know the name of big sports memorabilia collectors? Samantha, I thought you had a podcast. I thought you were an expert on this.
What I did find interesting is that a lot of people think Dennis Walker's death was a gang hit.
Why?
I think he might have been involved in some gangs. There is also another Ponzi scheme guy who was operating in Medford, Oregon, that there's another Unsolved Mysteries episode about coming up. His name was...
Man, don't invest in Medford, guys.
His name was Stephen Cox, and he was basically conducting the same exact scheme. Like, even down to offering people 25% interest rates. Like, it was exactly the same scheme. They were both in Medford, Oregon.
I wonder which one started
No one's
first.
really sure if they were working together or what was going on, but it's weird and suspicious. And Yeah, a lot of the stuff is just missing. It seems like no one really, like, it changes hands so often at these auctions and stuff that no one can keep track of it. And a lot of people are confused about where it goes. Like, they'll think that this person has it. There was, I think, it was
I'm
either,
sure not all
either
of that
Pete
is...
Rose, was that his name? His wife, or maybe it was someone related to Babe Ruth who, like, had a suspicion about where the ring had ended up and actually called Unsolved Mysteries. I don't know. It's extremely convoluted and I don't understand, but the point is a lot of the stuff is missing. Yeah, I don't care. But there's lots of people that do, I guess. The thing of it is about some of the stuff, I almost wonder, like, I know if you care about baseball, if you really care about Babe Ruth's uniform, don't be offended by this, but I almost think that the fact that some of this stuff is missing makes it more valuable. You know what I mean? Like, if this stuff existed in the Baseball Hall of Fame, people could just go see it. Not many people would care. But the fact that there's this mystery about where it is and the fact that, like, makes people interested in it. It makes people write websites and Reddit threads about where it could be. I don't know.
The other comment, I'm guessing this episode was made before Pete Rose was kicked out of the league for gambling.
It was.
So they kept being like,
they kept talking about how cool
this collection is legit. Pete Rose showed up, and then Mac was like, "Yeah, have you checked Pete Rose's house? Is that where all this stuff ended up?"
Very shortly after this episode is when he got kicked out. So yeah, this was before that. A lot of people on the internet were like, "Yeah, that stuff is kind of, you know, basically what you said." Like, maybe because Pete Rose was at the opening of Dennis Walker's Hall of Fame. So a lot of people are like,
maybe he stole that stuff back.
Maybe
like
he
OJ
has some of it.
Maybe he was like, actually, I want that diamond ring. That's mine.
Right.
And then he took it.
Or maybe he's selling, he himself had it and then sold it so he could get more money. I don't know.
Or maybe that one was fake.
Fishy. And
I'm just making shit up now. Sports, fraud, Pete Rose.
That's all I had for that one. I really had no energy to go any further.
Don't care.
Check out Hall of Shame if you're interested in this, because I think you'll probably find that website interesting. I didn't, but I don't care about sports, so
go find stuff out and then don't report back to us and don't tell us what you find, because we won't understand what you're saying and we really don't care. I remembered that there was a sportsy segment in this one and I was like, oh no, it wasn't as bad as I thought, because it was a little bit more about fraud.
The fraud was interesting. Yeah, I'll give it that.
It's more about him being a con man and a Ponzi scheme. So it's not that that's the most interesting kind of case, but anything is more interesting than sports.
Yeah, I was interested in the fraud. I was not interested.
I felt bad for that woman who worked for him and was clearly like super duped out of her money.
Yeah, all of his employees. I've watched several of these Ponzi scheme segments and we'll cover them in the future in Unsolved Mysteries. All of their employees always invest in them, which is crazy to me. But I guess you trust them, so you think that they'll be good on their word and you'll get your 25% interest.
I sort of felt like from Robert Stack's narration that he was very interested in this case. And he seemed very impressed by Pete Rose.
Oh, yeah, there was a shot of Robert Stack in, like, a dugout, you know, like, walking.
He seemed a little into it.
He holds up a number 3 Yankees uniform. He's like, sadly, this is not Babe Ruth's uniform.
Because if it was, I would try it on and run around this field. I think it's time to rate this episode.
Yes, I do.
After all of our goddamn research, for all of our work, which I know our 5 listeners appreciated so much, let's rate this one.
First category is mysteriousness. These were fucking mysterious.
Yeah.
All 3 of them.
Thumbs
Even
up for
the
mysterious.
Sports one.
Because we still don't know what happened.
No. Where's all that stuff?
Who took it? Did that guy kill himself? Probably.
Yeah, was he murdered?
Who knows?
D.B. Cooper, very mysterious. The Boys on the Tracks, very mysterious. Thumbs way up.
Even though there's only 3 mysteries, which I'm glad there weren't anymore because we couldn't do any more research.
No.
Thumbs way up for mysteriousness.
Yep. Reenactments. The reenactments were okay in this one.
They were okay.
There weren't a lot of funny. The plane one where there was like a half-empty plane was pretty funny.
The guy crawling to a creek and then immediately dying amused me a lot. But for the most part, they don't really stand out.
Yeah, it was pretty. A lot of what they showed in the last segment was actual sports footage, so that wasn't a reenactment. So I'm a thumbs sideways on the reenactments.
Sideways.
Fashion did not stand out a lot.
No.
The woman who got duped out of her money at the end
had some nice glasses.
Really humongous glasses. The biggest glasses that have ever been made, I think.
Yeah, but they sort of really worked for her face. I don't know.
She was rocking it.
Yeah.
Otherwise, everyone else was just very normal, I think. Not a lot of 80s fashion.
No, I guess that's a thumbs down for me. It's unremarkable.
Thumbs down. Also, so there was only one mustache that stood out to me. I don't know if the new prosecuting attorney in your case.
Yes, that's exactly what I was going to say.
Richard Garrett, he had a standout mustache.
He has a kind of walrus mustache. Does that mean?
Exactly how I would describe it.
Yeah, and it's, if mustaches are ever described as in a walrus cut.
They are now.
They are now. Where he went into a barber and he went, give me the walrus. That's again, what do men do? I don't know. I assume they go into barbers and they say stuff like that.
It covered almost his entire top lip. Like it was an impressive mustache.
It's a serious mustache. I think he wins
hands down. Yeah, Richard
not
Garrett.
a dirtbag. He seemed dedicated to the case, and he was willing to admit that no, they did not smoke
20 marijuana cigarettes, which is how he kept describing
Mary Joanna cigarettes. Yes. So
he gets MVM for sure.
MVM.
Our last category to rate is Robert Stack's outfits, which also
unremarkable.
I feel like his outfits don't get more like fashion-y for the time until we get a little later on in the series. Because right now all he's wearing is suits.
Yeah,
boring.
They're boring suits.
It's becoming the same thing every week. I'm a thumbs down.
Yeah.
On Robert Stack's.
Not impressive.
How do you rate this episode, Liz? I'm pretty high. I think I'm like a 4.5. Robert Stack.
Oh, really?
I really liked it. I like the boys. The boys on the tracks fascinate me. I remember watching this one and really finding it captivating. I think the D.B. Cooper mystery was interesting. Even though I don't like sports, I was kind of into it. So I'm a 4.5 Robert Stacks.
I feel like I'm going to mark it down more for the sports.
Okay.
Than you.
That's fair.
I might give it a 3.
Okay.
I feel like the Boys on the Tracks mystery is really interesting, but almost they didn't cover enough of it.
That's true. You do have to kind of separate how they covered it versus
it's hard to know
else.
now. But I think I'm going to give it 3 Robert Stacks. So you can, listeners, you can average it out. It's a solid episode, though.
I like it.
It's a decent one.
I would recommend this one for sure.
Yeah.
Do you have a recommendation for our listeners this week?
I do.
Let's hear it.
My recommendation is Find a Grave.
Oh, I'm intrigued.
So, Find a Grave, I've used for many years, is a website where you can find out where people are buried.
Who are you looking for?
Now, some people do genealogy.
Okay.
And so they're trying to find out where various family members are buried.
Gotcha.
I'm never doing that. I am occasionally looking for famous people.
Oh.
Have you ever visited any famous people's graves?
No, I haven't.
I could only think of 2 that I've been to. I went to Howard Hughes' grave.
Okay. We learned last episode how fascinated you are with Howard Hughes.
I am kind of into Howard Hughes. I realized he was a terrible, horrible person. I just sort of wanted to see what his, grave situation was like.
As like you do.
Yeah. Like, he was a crazy rich person. Did he have a crazy rich person grave? And it turns out it's like kind of fenced off. His family saw me coming. You can't really... He has like a big mausoleum-ish area, but you can't really get to his actual grave.
Okay.
And then the other person that I went to see was Vampira, the late-night television hostess who was way ahead of her time. She's buried in Hollywood Forever Cemetery, which is one of my favorite places on earth. So beautiful. But the reason I bring up Find a Grave is I recently found out that there's a free phone app. You can get the Find a Grave phone app, and you can use that a few different ways. So you could, want to look up where your family member is buried or someone you used to know is buried or a famous person is buried. But also, the aspect of it that I thought was worth recommending is if you are traveling, it has sort of a maps feature. So you can find cemeteries.
So make a quick stop off on your vacation. Your family's in the backseat like, mom's looking at graves again.
That's exactly why I'm recommending it. I feel like in the past few years, I've just sort of admitted, I want to visit cemeteries. And I think I always did, and I'm just embracing it more as I get older.
They're cool places to visit. We went on a cemetery tour in Minneapolis that I loved. I want to go back next year.
Yeah, we went to the Pioneers and Soldiers Memorial Cemetery in South Minneapolis. It's on Lake Street.
If you're in the area, schedule a tour. They're free. We donated a little money to the restoration fund.
Yeah,
but
people aren't buried there anymore. It's just historic, and it's really interesting. There's some very wild stories.
She tailored a murder and mayhem tour for us, which was very sweet.
Of course she did. Yeah, there's even more we could say about that, but that's like a whole other...
That's a whole other recommendation.
That's a whole other recommendation. So I feel like if you're on a trip, if you're somewhere anyway, you can pull up your free Find a Grave app and say, oh, what cemeteries are in the area? It has photos. You can request photos of markers. Say you live on the other side of the country than your relative is buried.
Oh, how nice.
You could request that someone go and take a picture of that grave, and then volunteers upload photos to the app. There's an iPhone version and an Android version.
That's a cool recommendation.
That's my recommendation for this week.
My recommendation is for a podcast. It's a new podcast, and it's done by some ladies that are also from Minnesota. So they're in our true crime Facebook group, and they had announced that they had started a podcast. They are the Scary Sisters.
Oh, yes.
Yes, and their podcast is about scary movies. I don't watch scary movies.
Yeah.
I will admit this right now. I think the scariest movie I ever saw was... I can't even think of one off the top of my head because I don't watch horror movies. I don't like to be scared. It's not my thing, which is weird since I like true crime.
It's a different
But I've listened to
thing.
all of the episodes they have released. They have 4 or 5 episodes out, and they're really entertaining. I haven't watched any of the movies they're talking about, but I still enjoy listening to them. It's 3 sisters. I will say it's hard to do a podcast. I'm with more than 2 people.
Yeah.
Like, we have a hard time not talking over each other. I can't even imagine if we had one more person, how much of a clusterfuck it would sound. And these ladies do a really nice job. They strike a really good balance. They feed off of each other well. They're sisters, so they have really good chemistry. They're funny. I really enjoy it, and I don't enjoy horror movies, so that should tell you.
Okay.
Yeah, it's really well done. Go support them. Listen to their podcast. Download an episode. I think you'll really enjoy it. Yeah, they're also from Minnesota, and
that's another
new
true
podcast.
indie podcast.
Yeah, I think they do it in
Grassroots.
it sounded like they were doing it in someone's laundry room the last episode I watched.
There you go.
You know, they're a lot like us. They're new and doing a really good job, I think, the Scary Sisters.
That's awesome.
Yeah, give them a listen. That's all we have for you this week.
I am so tired. We need to be done.
Enter our giveaway. Send us recommendations for our Halloween special. We're still looking for something to watch for that. It might be a bonus episode. We don't know, or it might be a regularly scheduled one. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Perhaps It's You. You can send us an email at perhapsitsyoupodcast@gmail.com. And we'll see you in the next episode.
Yeah, get out there and solve some mysteries, people.
Yeah, do it.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.